10. Discussions and Discoveries. A Drop of Poison. Chapter 9. Discussions and Discoveries. Disclaimer. Naruto belongs to Kishimoto. Ramen belongs to Naruto. Enough said. Prank Day 3. Summoning Technique. Naruto called out, slamming his hand into the ground. For the third time tonight, smoke came out at this call, in this instance much more than before. When it dispersed, Nanabo was standing there, arms crossed. See, I told you weren't using enough, Aikibo added. How's it going, Cage? The usual. And you, the rabbit boss said, passing the time while Naruto recovered. The boy currently was inhaling in great gulps, sweat shining on his brow. Great. There's so much new stuff here I can't even know where to start. It beats the prank wars with Raibo any day. Good. I'll summon you for a meeting sometime next week. He said, smiling, then bent towards Naruto. You gonna be okay, partner? It took a few seconds for the student to answer. Hopefully it won't take this much each time. It had actually tired him more than when he'd mass summon clones when training towards chakra draining. He finally straightened back up. The plan's working, so pretty good, partner. He extended his hand. They shook, smiling. So you're gonna bring me up to speed on this prank of yours? Yup, Naruto answered. It all started less than a month ago, actually. It was the final exam at the academy, and I passed the whole morning training in summoning. That's pretty much it. Naruto finished, stretching on his chair. Nanabo nodded, thinking. Calling it a prank wasn't descriptive enough, even though that was certainly part of it. It was prank, long-term infiltration, revenge and legal manipulation all at the same time. It had managed to make him laugh quite a few times, especially the various retaliations to Naruto's maths teacher, but the goal of this wasn't simple laughter. It was much more. He didn't need to do anything about it. It seemed that the newest member of his court had things well in hand, anyway. So, then, he would help where he could. And how are going your own studies? The rabbit asked. Good enough. Naruto shrugged. Right now I'm working on modifying the cage bunshin to be used only for communication, but progress is slow. Not much outside of that. That's not enough. The summon said. A few hand signs later Miyamoto appeared in a burst of smoke. The smaller rabbit bowed at its leader right as he appeared. I come as summoned. What is your bidding, Shogun? He asked instantly. Miyamoto, Nanabo said, in an official tone. Is it true you haven't yet found someone to teach your techniques? Yes, I'm sure you remember the newest member of our clan. Would you be able to teach him? Well, Miyamoto answered, visibly deep in thought. He has the necessary frame, which is something most rabbits lack. And he has proven he can learn, so I do not see why not. Naruto, the rabbit leader said, cutting towards the boy who had stayed silent during the latest exchange. The rabbit clan is all about both teaching and learning. One learns the techniques of the clan, and uses these to discover new techniques or modify old ones. Then he or she teaches those to the clan, and the circle goes on. Right, Miyamoto here hasn't found anybody that was both able and willing to learn the sword from him. Would you do him the honor of being his student? Naruto thought for a moment. He'd already worked with Miyamoto, and he'd found the rabbit strict but respectful, something which wasn't a problem. However, that would be cutting into his training time, and he had quite a few ideas he wanted to try out. In the end, however, one point came above the others. Swords were cool, and he'd be cooler using one. Sure, the academy student answered with his usual smile. Could I also learn? Said Aikibo from his perch on Naruto's head. I cannot stop you from trying. Responded the sword-wielding rabbit. But you would find it much more difficult. Most rabbits your size do not have the necessary strength in the arms and fingers to properly wield a one-handed weapon, not to mention the issue of finding a sword the right size. I will not send you away when training your partner, however. Good, the summon leader said, smiling, and the seriousness of the moment evaporated in an instant. We'll work on the details later. Now, pranks. What do you have planned? Smiling himself, Naruto answered. Well, there's this one I have. Biwahahaha. You have to get me here for that one. I know a genjutsu that'll complement that prank perfectly. Nanabo said, repeated hitting the ground with his left paw. Naruto had quickly noticed that whenever the rabbit laughed hard enough, he unconsciously did so. Some kind of nervous tick, probably. Glad to have you there. I'll make sure to give you a call once I have the timing down. The boy answered, smiling. Perfect. Now is there anything else on the plan? The bunny leader asked. Well, there are a meeting of those in on the prank a little later, so you might want to be present for that, but outside that I didn't have anything planned out. Nanabo thought about it for a minute. He was about to say yes, but held back at the last moment. He'd nearly not realized, but Aikibo had barely said a dozen words since he'd started talking to the boy. While his grandson could be direct with him in private, he tended to stay silent and defer to him much too much while in public. The small rabbit would be much more active if he was absent. No need. Aikibo, you'll be speaking for the rabbits in my stead, okay? Aikibo tensed. You sure, Cage? Perfectly. I'm sure you'll do a good job as my voice. The rabbit on Naruto's head nodded. Then, Naruto, I'll be waiting for your call about that prank. Don't forget to call on Miyamoto every night for training at the very least. Will do. See you, partner, Nanabo said, waving. Naruto waved back, and the summon disappeared. Prank Day 6. The village was abandoned, and had been for quite some time. It was situated about halfway between Konoha and the border to Grass, deep in the forests of Fire Kingdom. The Naruto that had found it guessed from the buildings that it had been some sort of logging camp, but that was all he could tell, really. Its exact position and its current state made it a perfect meeting spot for the various clones of Naruto who were in charge of the trading network. These bunchins were originally 3, but ended up having to multiply themselves to keep up with the multiplying copies that were spreading everywhere in the ninja world. They were now more than a dozen. The way they increased in number was simple. Originally, the 3 each took care of an area, meaning either east, west, or fire itself. But as the number of clones infiltrating various places grew, there started being too much for a single person to track. The clone in charge of that area created new bunchins either as secretaries, or split his territory in smaller increments. And the process repeated itself when too much work started piling up once again. The entire group was inside the building which looked the most stable, around a table that was actually a clone, as no furniture intact enough was found. They were grouped as per their respective region. Okay people, this is our 3rd meeting, said the bunchin in charge, who was officially head of the region of Konoha. Anyone has anything urgent to bring to the table, or can we get directly to the agenda? No one said anything. Then let's get to it. First, clothes for Iruka. Status. A clone rose from his seat in response. The only difference between him and the other Narutos was the set of googles he wore around his upper left arm, the symbol of the jumpers. I brought the package to Konoha yesterday night, and delivered it directly to her place. That was what jumpers did. They use the Kawarimi jutsu to jump distances and bring packages. They were only few as of now, but their number was expected to grow quickly. Good. 1 down. Second is, we have our first stock from outside Konoha. I know it isn't much, but it's gonna be enough as samples to see if those items are worth it. We have spices, medicinal plants, silk and a crate of Hakudo Cho peaches. Janae, Ane, he nodded to the civilian clone parents. You're leaving with those. We'll be expecting news as soon as you have them. They both nodded in return. This would actually be their first task as an actual part of the network. Anything to add about this? Silence answered him. 3 then. Maps. A pair of bunchins stepped up and unrolled a map nearly as long as the table. The leaders of the network had switched from the smaller ones to this cloth representation when issues of scale became evident between the various maps. As of yesterday, we now have a team in both Rice Field Country and in Northern Tea Country, which means we now have members in 7 different countries. By this time next week, we should be in even 10 countries, provided that the team to Wave Country can find a boat to ride on. Clones nodded left and right in agreement. The team to Wave was already 5 days late, and it seemed it could continue in that vein for a while. This brings us to our last point, catalogs. He brought a rolled scroll to the table. We have the first draft of the list of products the network could get his hands on, along with the estimated prices. The Tea Country products are not yet there, as the group arrived only early this morning. He brought out other scrolls, copies of the first. I'm expecting region heads to come after the meeting to get one. Any last words before we close the meeting? As usual, only silence answered. Then, meeting closed. The next one is in a week in Warehouse 4. Let's get back to work, people. The clone leading the meeting clapped in hands twice and rose, as did everyone else. Most walked or jumped out, with only a few remaining. Janae and Ane walked with the person who was, if only nominally, their superior. Are all meetings like this? The bunchin impersonating the father asked. What, you expected anything else? We're all Narutos, so long meetings would kill us with our mediocre attention span for such things. Fast and loose is the way to go. He tossed a catalog to the head of Eastern Fire Country. Beside, it works. That's what's important, in the end. The supposed parents couldn't find any way to refute that. Prank Day 9. Okay, now what? Said the leading clone back to the group. This particular group was one of the 5 training in the new elemental techniques, with the one assigned to them being Kaden, a Karaka Jigokuhi. As it often happened within clone ranks, the whole jutsu learning had become somewhat of a competition being the various teams. Boasting led every group to proclaim that they would finish first, and now each was stuck trying to back their words. I don't know, let me get the scroll, said another bunchin, who then took off in a run. The other members had nothing else to add, so they only focused at keeping the black balls over their hands stable. Those balls were the core of the technique, a sort of shell upon within which you built the fireball, or so they understood. Those balls could be thrown, though distance quickly made stability an issue, and would burst upon contact with anything solid, releasing the flames inside. They hadn't actually found what made the technique dangerous as of yet. They knew the scroll mentioned most students having died due to accidents in training, but most failures they had encountered released fire similar in amount to that of that fire breath technique Naruto had seen Sasuke use, and not much more. Enough to burst a clone, sure, but hardly deadly enough to be banned by ninja standards. The clone came back with another, this one holding the scroll. Standard practice, actually, with all the techniques that sometimes went out of control around this room. They hadn't another physical set of copies of the scroll of forbidden seals. It just hadn't come up. The leading clone grabbed and unrolled the scroll, and started reading out loud. Dragon, reverse tiger, dragon. Focus chakra above the palm of either hand. Form of a black ball. Constant concentration. Aha. He intoned. After having generated a stable ball, one can now feed the technique fire aspected chakra using his other hand, increasing the heat so contained, he quoted directly from the paper. He then looked at the whole group. Silence ruled for a second. So, how does someone generate fire aspected chakra? No clue, said the leader, and this was visibly the general opinion. We'll need to find out. Hours later, they hadn't advanced a single more inch. There was nothing as such in the copies of the academy textbooks they had. The other Kaden technique scrolls only referred to it without explaining what it was, and they all other clones had no clue what it was or how it was formed. In the end, they kept working on generating and maintaining the sphere, and would think about how to find a solution. At worst, if they found nothing, they'd petition to ask Iruka at the next council meeting. They were at an impasse, otherwise. Prank day 11. Do a little turn, exclaimed Ringo. Iruka rolled her eyes. Turn, 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 turn. The others took up as a chant. Iruka obligatorily did a turn, causing the skirt to twirl along with her. The 5 girls before her watched in rapt attention as it did. I like that shade of orange. Amber, right, said Ringo. Yes, but the previous ensemble went much better with her skin tone, countered Fumishi. This skirt flutters so prettily. Is it silk, or something else? Added Mihoshi. Discussions intersected questions as the group argued upon the merits of the latest ensemble. Iruka answered as best as she could, though she had realized she was in over her head. And how? Just in the last 2 hours, she had learned the names of 24 shades of green, and at least half that in red, yellow and orange separately. And what kind of color name was atomic tangerine anyhow? And that's not counting cuts or materials. Iruka, being Naruto, had had a very limited wardrobe for most of her memories, and rarely opportunities to buy new clothes before the start of the prank. Naruto's well-known bright orange shinobi outfit had actually been delivered to his door one day, and Naruto and the clones, by extension, were pretty sure the old man had something to do with that. And they were right, somewhat. After a meeting where the boy had complained not being able to buy this piece of required ninja equipment, the third had ordered the Anbu to drop said piece of clothing at the boy's door. He'd even specified that there should not be any tracking seals or other surprises of the sort. The ninja who received the request had the bright idea of finding the required object in the most visible of available colors, as he'd been hunting said boy after a prank often enough. He thought it would help. Needless to say, Naruto loved it, and it did not help in any way. So, which one do you prefer? Asked Fumishi as the discussing died down. Iruka didn't know what to answer. To her male eyes, none were something she would willingly wear outside a prank, of course. As something for ninja, they all failed, being far from solid enough to withstand active service, and from his limited civilian point of view all were equally comfortable. Well, the skirt bothered him some, but that was because a man shouldn't wear such things, and not any other reason. In the end, she answered what she could. None of them, really. I prefer the suit I usually wear at the academy over all of them. It was the best she could come up with. The rest of the group sighed in near perfect harmony. You're such a tomboy, Iruka, said Ringo. The clone, of course, was in no way insulted by this. Your mother is dead, right? Added Asano. Asano, we don't ask such things. Fumishi, the leader of the group, replied, cuffing the girl lightly on the shoulder. The effect was completely lost when she turned towards Iruka with expectant eyes, visibly desiring the answer like the others. Iruka acted as if the question surprised her, mainly to gain time to think. Neither she or any other Naruto clone had worked out much of her history or family, so she didn't know what to answer. As this was the second time this happened, she mentally noted that she'd have to get together with a few other clones and work out a complete history, and that sooner than later. But now, answering was first. She decided to go along with it, as it would be difficult to argue otherwise. She also supposed it was factually true, as Naruto had none he could call mother. Yes, she answered, bowing her head. And you were raised by your father alone, or only with other men, right? Right, she said, as this was actually the truth. Iruka and the old man were the primary figures in his life, and both were male. I knew it, Fumishi said. Wait, how did they know that? How did you find out? The Bunchan asked. I've known 3 types of tomboys. There are those who were raised as tomboys because their mothers were tomboys, those who refuse to act like their mothers and so act like tomboys, and those who were raised by men and act like them without knowing any better. The first type knows somewhat about cosmetics, fashion and such stuff, as their mother will have taught them what little they know. The second knows most, however willingly doesn't care or apply it in any way. Only the third type really doesn't know. She then turned around. So, girls, one of our number need our help in learning what it is to be a woman. What do you say about that? She asked the rest of the group. All smiled. Let's go, replied Ringo, visibly eager. Turning back to her, Fumishi was smiling herself. Today then, we're gonna teach you about fashion, using the sacred female art of people watching. Iruka was then dragged to an ice cream shop in the middle of the business district, and had to comment on the people passing by. Like, this man is a well-to-do peasant, or, a down-on-his-luck merchant. Her colleges were simply better however. A peasant in his best clothes, said Nishi. This cut is quite out of fashion and he visibly isn't used to wearing them. A successful merchant going to do something dirtying, pointed out Mihoshi. While most of what he wears is old and used, he's wearing new fashionable sandals, and the bracelet he wears seems to be worth quite a bit. How about this group? Asked Iruka, pointing at a group of 3 children playing together. Just to see what they could say. The girl, I'd say minor nobility. She has a posture like she's used to getting her way and most non-nobles wouldn't let a child out to play with a pendant, replied Fumishi. The 2 boys are peasant sons, visibly, added Ringo while taking a bite of her ice cream. Resistant clothes. Shades that hide dust well and clean easily. Left one works the earth with his parents, probably, pointed out Asano. You can see the earth stains that don't wash out on his knees. Maybe there was something to this fashion thing after all. Prank day 15. Iruka was finishing work alone at the academy. It wasn't anything new. Being head teacher had its perks, a somewhat higher salary and more authority, but also had its disadvantages, such as the extra work that tended towards late hours. The Chunin had forgotten how many times he had to beg off a diner or a drink, simply to continue working. But in this case, it was an advantage. The current academy class just had their first history exam, and Iruka wanted to look at Naruto and his two clones' work. Not that he wanted to change anything. No, he just wanted to make sure the tests wouldn't give clues pointing toward the infiltrating copies. He'd only change answers if he really needed to. Grateful for the fact that he was alone in the building, Iruka infiltrated his coworker Kazuhi's office, and took out the latest test papers. Less than a minute later he had the 3 answer sheets lined up on the desk and started poring over them. 97 for Iruka thought. 71 for Murmuru and 45 for Naruto. A quick look revealed nothing incriminating. Iruka was of two minds about bringing the subject up to Naruto. On one side, if he gave the teachers what they expected they'd be less curious about him. On the other, Naruto didn't really need to use the prank to pass. It would be much better if he went through on his own efforts. Then again, the teacher thought. It's obvious from Ariko's results that he masters the material. He started going down the questions, comparing them one by one. Naruto hadn't won himself any points by writing down, "don't care," as the answer to question 9. Then Iruka came to question 13 out of 20. Ariko's answer was picture perfect, an exact textbook answer, which netted her 5 points. Murmuru's was similar, with some difference in vocabulary, which was worth again 5 points. But it was the same with Naruto, and on his sheet was written a red 0 beside the answer. Iruka reread the 3 answers one after the other. All had the same core meaning, the same information, with only some differences in vocabulary. Yet Naruto got a 0 where the others gained points. Iruka froze at the implications. They jumped into action. A few seconds later the original tests were back into their drawer, while Iruka had brought out last year's final exam. And again the same pattern came up. Even worse. Sometimes Naruto's answer was the exact same as the one of another student, and always was Naruto's rank lower. Now fully into the chase, Iruka brought out everything. All the tests, all the notes, all the graded assignments Naruto had done since entering the academy. He didn't go in details, passing over quickly, focusing on the questions with the worst results, comparing them to others in his class. He quickly came to the very conclusion he'd been afraid of. Naruto should have passed long ago. His report card for his first year at the academy had him fail by less than 3%, and that was including everything, such as his taijutsu borderline pass, and his ninjutsu total fail. Iruka's recalculation would have brought Naruto final score by at least 5 points, if not more. Continuing on, the second year was the same. However, Naruto was already visibly starting to make less effort. The number of missing assignments increased, the answers became less worked on and more rushed, and his notes were lower, even in Iruka's recalculations. This time the teacher wasn't sure if Naruto would have actually passed or failed, his scores were just too much on the limit to tell. Then coming to the third year, Iruka noticed something else. He'd not realized before, but last year was the third time in a row that the final ninjutsu examination was on the bunshin. Thinking back he remembered Mizuki suggesting it last year, while he couldn't remember how the decision was made the year before. Some people might think it coincidence, but Iruka doubted the existence of the word when it came to Naruto. There was simply too much for that. "Iruka, are you there?" said a voice. The teacher jumped out of his chair at the sound, only to recognize Naruto's voice. "Here," he said in answer, then was hit by a wave of guilt as he looked down at the piles of exam paper. While he hadn't joined in the oppression, he'd been head teacher, so it was his responsibility to ensure that every student had a good education. And he flubbed it. "Is everything okay, sensei? You were supposed to be at the meeting 30 minutes ago," his student said. A quick look at the clock confirmed those words. It was already past 10. He'd been so into it he hadn't noticed. Turning to look at his young charge, Iruka didn't know what to say. How could he explain? He had to, however. Naruto deserved that, in spades. "Naruto," Iruka said, his voice low. "Take a seat." The boy did, his face questioning all the while. The Chunin teacher knew he wasn't acting as Naruto was used to, so he wasn't surprised. "I'm sorry, Naruto," the adult said as soon as his student was fully in his seat. "I failed you." The boy went as though he wanted to interrupt, but Iruka stopped him with a hand and continued. "I've been going through your latest history exam, just to make sure you hadn't inadvertently given your teacher any clue when I found something." "Damn," Naruto said, hitting his open left hand with his fist. "I thought I had done well enough. Is the prank in danger? Or is Kazuhi only suspicious?" He put both his hand forward as if praying. "Please tell me it's only suspicion." "Nothing like that," answered Iruka, inwardly cursing the fact that he'd given the wrong idea. "There's really no other way to say it." He added gravely. "Naruto, your teachers failed you on purpose. You should have passed 3 years ago." Iruka dropped his head in shame. "And I didn't notice before now." There was an uncomfortable silence for a minute or so, then the teacher brought his head back up. Looking at the face Naruto was making hurt. "Broken," was the only description that fit in his mind. Nevertheless, he soldiered on. He explained how he just noticed, how the notes had been changed. He gave his revised scores, and explained when he should or should not have been promoted. It took a good hour. The Chunin then went back to silence to let his student process the information. It wasn't long before Naruto answered. "So, what? What happens now?" he said, his voice sad beyond measure. "Now depends on you, Naruto. If you want, I'll go right this minute to the Hokage with what I found. He will not be happy with hearing what I have to say, but I'm sure he'll promote you to genin on the spot, along with some form of punishment for those who wronged you. I don't know if you'll get a team right away," Iruka continued. "As that depends on how many genin students and jonin teachers are currently available. You'd have to drop your prank." However, the teacher added as an addendum. Naruto reacted to this, however. And what would you recommend? The boy said in a small voice. Iruka thought for a good moment about this. He loathed what he was about to say, but it was what was best in his mind for his student. Personally, I'd recommend keeping the course and finishing the year. Your notes from last year show that you visibly need to revise the basics, especially in maths and history. With all the students graduating, I'm 100% sure that getting a team won't be an issue, nor will getting a Jonin Sensei be one. And don't worry, he added with a growl in his voice. I won't be forgiving this. I am already building a report on the favoritism of the teachers, and this will feature preeminently in it. The idea that someone would go to such lengths to hurt a child was horribly revolting to him. No need for. Seeing the face Naruto made with that start, Iruka cut him off. Yes, there is need. If it happened once it can happen again. And I will not have a child hurt simply because some people think he doesn't deserve what he worked for. I will have to live with not noticing what they did to you for the rest of my life, but I will not compound that mistake by letting them get away with it. And that is final. Naruto shrank back at those words. He'd never seen Iruka so violently passionate, outside possibly the beginning of his battle against his co-teacher Mizuki. Then he smiled. A passion like that he could respect in a teacher. I won't say anything else about it then, Naruto said. And we'll go with what you said about school. I'm kinda curious how far the prank can go, anyhow. He was smiling all the while. Looking at Naruto, Iruka saw through the smile the boy was giving the words he knew Naruto meant, and those words were a balm to his soul. To the Chunin, that smile meant, all is forgiven, and that was all he really needed to have. Merry Christmas. This is part of my present to you all. It has been a long and difficult road writing this, but I finally have something good enough from my point of view. As for last chapter's challenge, we have actually 2 winners, because there were 2 jokes hidden. Drak FRST wins the easy challenge with the Joden name, which of course actually means joke. W Midnight is the winner of the hard challenge, which was in the girl group's names. Fumashi, 1 Nishi, 2 Asano, 3 Mihoshi, 4 Ringo, 5. Which were their names in my original outline. Both of you, please PM me with the name of those 2 characters. They won't be directly important to the plot, but they'll be there. For the rest of you, I'll post other challenges if ideas come up, so good luck next time, and have a good year. 11. Pranks aplenty. A drop of poison. Chapter 10. Pranks aplenty. Disclaimer. Naruto belongs to Kishimoto. Ramen belongs to Naruto. Enough said. Prank Day 17. Officially, the Special Assassination and Tactical Squad, otherwise known as the Anbu, occupied 3 different buildings. These were of course simply decoys. The real Anbu office was a single completely different building in the opposite part of town, hidden within a trading company's offices. It was guarded day and night by at least a dozen different shinobi. This changed nothing for Naruto, however. He had long ago learned how to get near said office unseen at certain hours, where the shadows were deep enough for him to crawl there without being visible. He knew of 5 people, smokers, who tended to leave their windows open, and the best time to dodge the lines of sight of the rooftop patrols. He could get in the building undetected any day. Nanabo's genjutsu was overkill, really. Once inside, he followed a preset path he remembered from long ago, back when he was younger. After a set of pretty bad days, he'd been shifted into Anbu custody while said ninjas tried finding out what had happened. Which, unfortunately, they never did. Nevertheless, that meant that a young Naruto Uzumaki lived along the Anbu for nearly a month, eating in their cafeteria and sleeping on their couches. He even had a locker with what little possessions he owned at the time. And that was where he was heading. With silent gestures he directed the elder rabbit within the winding corridors of the building, while Aikibo served as a lookout from his usual position from the crown of Naruto's hair. The student was gradually leading both summons toward the place where the ANBUs left their mask when not on duty. Once inside, the room was never locked. In case of urgent summons, the trio quickly pushed the whole section of lockers off the wall, and gained access to their contents by removing the back panel, bypassing the security of even the most paranoid Anbu ninja this way. Now, look carefully, Nanabo said in a whisper, his paws starting to move. Hare, serpent, rat, reverse tiger, hare. He then reached out and touched the Anbu mask in the locker before him. The important part of this technique is the state of mind of the user, he continued in his low tone. He must have firmly in mind the thought that everything is normal. Practice it while I set up the rest of the stuff. He reached out and grabbed a scroll hanging from the side of Naruto's backpack. Naruto's first try failed, as did his second, third, and such all the way to the 17th. You're using too much. Try the minimum you can, said Aikibo from his perch. Try was the key word here. The jutsu failed to hold again. Still too much, the black rabbit answered. I can't put out any less than that. It's already difficult enough to get that little. He whispered, remembering not to shout at the last second. Nanabo came back from the locker he was working on at that very instant. Show me, partner. The student did. Again, the rabbit leader said, and once again Naruto complied. The summon shaked his head. Try this one. Hare, serpent, rat, reverse tiger, serpent, dragon, reverse rat, dragon, hare. Remember the state of mind. The boy nodded and tried again. This time, the technique held by the 3rd attempt. Good work, the elder summon said as he lightly slapped Naruto's shoulder. He would have ruffled the student's hair, but Aikibo's presence made that impossible. The jutsu you just did is an advanced version of the other one. It is both harder to notice by the affected person and harder to dispel in general, but generally too intensive for my pranks. I unfortunately cannot cast it over and over as I can with the other one. He noted, scratching his chin. By the amount you've put out in the last few minutes, I don't think you'll have an issue. He smiled. Now let's go on. The group went back to work and had whole place done before 20 more minutes had elapsed. Prank Day 18. Ikazuchi Oboro was officially a chunin of the Leaf, and had been so for the past 10 years. He tried 3 times his chance at a jonin promotion, and failed all 3. He was good enough, though somewhat lacking in leadership. He was usually on long-range courier or infiltration missions, and rarely in Konoha at all. At least, that what most documents would have you believe. Reality, as usual, was somewhat different. Ikazuchi Oboro was really a career Anbu, acting under the identity of Bat. He was one of the many who patrolled the town of Konoha proper, acting as both police and counter-espionage officers. And he'd been doing said job for the past 5 years. He was well known for a mix of sound-based genjutsus and ninjutsus that he used effectively for both stealth and combat purposes. And no, his parents were not killed in front of him while he was young by career criminals, unless by young you mean 16 and that the Kyuubi is a career criminal. He was in position, overlooking the merchant district, when his superior rat signed for a hidden meeting in their usual spot. A quick shunshin brought him there, and his captain appeared the same way a second later. Inspect your belongings, Anbu. A surprise inspection. Now, Oboro thought. Nevertheless, his hands automatically went through the motions of checking his equipment. Armor, in place. Sword, also. Holsters, present and full. Mask, worn and undamaged. Rainbow wig, still there. He even went and confirmed that his puffy nose was still glued on. All equipment present and accounted for, Captain. Rat visibly reacted under the mask, something which was evident to anyone used to Anbu. You are summoned before the Hokage at once. Go, he said, visibly sighing. That explains the inspection, that least, he thought. Yes sir. Another shunshin brought him out. Bat reporting is ordered, Hokage-sama, he said. Said person wasn't alone. The commander-in-chief of the ninja forces, Shikaku Nara, was there, along with both the Anbu commander and Kurenai Yuhi. He was pretty sure by now that something was up, but he couldn't see what it was. The snickers from the ANBUs watching the entrance had been illuminating in that regard. Bat, turn to the side. He did so instantly, coming face to face with a mirror. Tell me what you see. Myself, Hokage-sama. More details, please. Myself in Anbu suit, Hokage-sama. The village leader didn't stop him, so he continued. I am wearing my regulation armor over a black suit, with my sword strapped at my back. My mask is as usual half lime green and half hot pink, with a blue teardrop on the pink side and a purple star on the pink side, both below the eyes. My regulation puffy nose is in place, as are my exaggerated eyebrows. My multicolor wig is in proper position and still curly. Should I go in more detail? No, that will be enough, Bat. Besides him, the Anbu commander did a facepalm. Continue looking at the mirror. He did so. It barely took a moment before Kurenai brought her fingers in a ram seal. Kai. At that very instant, Oboro instantly noticed what was wrong. He quickly ripped out the nose and the eyebrows, and the wig joined them on the floor barely an instant later. The paint on the mask proved more resistant, however, so it ended up staying. Hokage-sama, I have no excuse, he quickly realized. He remembered the previous hours perfectly, and could not think of anything else to add. Do with me as you will, he said, head down. A ninja came down and gathered the items he had just removed, and added them to the contents of a box. Judging by the number of noses and eyebrows, he wasn't the only one who'd fallen to this prank. There even was a full Anbu mask in the box. It had a horn, like that of a unicorn. Bat, return to the Anbu quartermaster, who will give you a new mask. Then, please have hamster sent our way. The Anbu in the clown mask wasted no time in leaving, glad to have gotten out of any horrible punishment. Once he was gone, Sarutobi turned toward the Jonin next to him. So, what are your thoughts, Kurenai-san? I have never seen the like, she answered. Most genjutsus affect the 5 senses: sight, smell, touch, taste and hearing. A few rare go directly to the sense of balance while bypassing the others. The only woman in the room was visibly thinking. But I've never heard of something like this one. The technique behind this prank somehow affects one's perception of normality, making the subject of this jutsu seem perfectly normal to everyone noticing it. I have no clue where such a technique could come from. Not from Konoha for sure. Thank you, Kurenai-san. Please write down anything you can think that might help, the Hokage said as a ninja with a carrot-like nose and exaggerated lips came in. He sighed. Anything, he quickly added. The third could finally, as the other ninjas had left, indulge in a somewhat inappropriate laugh. As a leader of men he had to stay calm to the situation, but as a person he could not help but laugh. All the while he'd had the various ANBUs in his office he couldn't help but think, Naruto would laugh at this. And that was the crux of the issue. This was very much a Naruto-style prank, but the genjutsu made it impossible for him to perform. As if an academy student with issues in the simplest of techniques could perform a genjutsu Konoha's foremost mistress of the art had no knowledge of. And where would he have learned it anyway? In the end, 16 ANBUs were found with tampered masks, while a search of the lockers found 20 more still unused. The prankster, however, was never caught, the only clue they found being the smell of rabbits. Prank Day 21. So, report. Anybody found anything? Said the clone leading this group to the numerous other copies before him. A stream of, no, in various formats were his answer from his partners at Learning Kaiden, Akaraka Jigokuhi. They were well and truly stuck. Which is not to say they did nothing. They had kept on training with the black spheres, managing even something similar to dodgeball in the last few days, but nothing on how to fill said constructs with the fire. Any clue on how to proceed? The clone added. Again, all answers were of the negative sort. The clone sighed. Whatever lead they might have had in the informal competition between the jutsu learning bunchen was evaporating like mist at high noon, if it hadn't vanished completely already. Another of the blonde copies was looking around. Shouldn't we be more than this? The leader did a quick head count and realized that this Naruto was right. They were missing at least 3 people, and he didn't remember any part of his group bursting since the last meeting. The group as a whole debated for a few minutes on what to do about this, when the point became moot. One of those missing had arrived. A few clones went and started questioning, while others just stared out, waiting for answers. We might have a solution. And then he had all ears. He basked in the feeling for a while, then gave a single instruction. Follow. The group did, and he led them through the sewers to a grate that hadn't seen much usage, by the looks of it. The leading clone stopped right beside the ladder going up. We all went the wrong way about this. We mainly focused about how, when we should have put effort on who and where. So tell me, the clone asked. Who were the best known in Konoha for their fire techniques? Smirking, he then climbed the ladder 3 rungs at the time. When each member of the Kaden group finally were back on ground level and saw where they were, they all wanted to hit themselves. The answer was evident, and they hadn't even thought of it. Before them was the Uchiha district, which had long been home to some of the most famous fire users in history. The technique they were trying to learn was even based on stealing that very power from exactly this family. Naruto had, long before the start of the prank, tried infiltrating the Uchiha district, mostly as a way to escape his pursuers. It had bounced back on him, as all points of entry were alarmed 3 ways from Sunday. That particular chase was cut very short at that point, and he got a double lecture and punishment for his trouble. But now they had a way to bypass such seals, and the 2 other missing clones were already doing so, negating the alarms on a half-hidden side door in the walls of the district. The group quickly made its way inside, while the pair of bunchins kept their position, maintaining the hole in the wards. So, what now, boss? The guiding copy said. Said clone looked around for an instant before replying. You found this, so it's your show, he answered with a smile. The rest of the group nodded their approval. The new leading bunchin looked around for a moment. Even if he hadn't known of what had happened here in the past, he could have guessed. While there were no bodies or blood in sight, the signs were evident. Charred spots on the walls, the results of fire jutsu, could be seen here and there. Leftover marks from kunai and shuriken dotted the place, and there were gouges in the grounds from the usage of ninja techniques. Any ninja worth his salt would have noticed what had gone on here. We split into 3 groups. The first 2 will go methodically and create a clone while holding anything interesting, especially whatever looks like a jutsu scroll. We then put it back where it was. Be careful about traps, as we might have only bypassed the first layer. The last group will go back out and gather blank scrolls for copying. We'll work the same way we did with the forbidden scroll, okay? The rest of the clones nodded. Outside of that, we leave everything as it is. This is not like whatever items we found abandoned, this is somebody's family legacy. As much as I like Sasuke, and I don't, even he doesn't, something like that. Another series of nods was his answer. The guiding clone smiled. Then let's go, people. It took an hour and a half of searching before the Kaden group found what they were looking for. Surprisingly, they ended up finding it in Sasuke's own former home, in his brother's room. Said room had been completely ransacked, but whatever scrolls were there hadn't been destroyed but only neglectfully strewn around. The specific scroll the group now had contained instructions for the clan's great fireball technique, but aimed at those whose elemental affinity wasn't fire. It contained various training exercises to improve ability with fire techniques, along with tips on how to tackle them. None of the Narutos had any ideas what was their elemental affinity, what it entailed, or if they even had one at all, so they guessed that was at least part of the issue they were having. The copy of said scroll joined their expanding library in a position of honor. In the end, it took a little more than 4 hours for the Kaden group to go over the totality of the Uchiha compound, and the result was 29 different Jutsu scrolls, some even containing more than one technique. Their various power levels were all over the place, from a complex A-ranked fire release technique they didn't think they would ever master, to a large scroll of E-ranked cleaning and grooming jutsu. They had even managed to learn and perform a few techniques from that one and use them to clean up their tracks. And by the end of the day the group had managed the first of the fire training exercises, which meant that all of them could generate a flame similar to that of a match from their hands. Prank Day 26. Things were not going well for Janae and Ane. The 2 copies who represented the elder civilian couple were in charge of finding customers for the products the clone network could get their hands on, both for funds as the group did not want to live on Iruka's money, and for their cover. It was not going according to plan, however. The 2 of them had visited dozens of stores, factories and other such enterprises. People seemed interested, some even glad, until the following question came out. Who's the seat representing you on the merchant council? That killed everything. Once Janae said that they had no one representing them, their prospective customers at best became shy and evasive, and at worst had them thrown out of the building. Regardless of what happened, they were out of luck. They of course tried getting such a person to represent them, but that was not to be either. The most polite simply said no, while others tried buying them off. No one seemed to want to work with them. The one who came closest asked for an outrageous sum along with half the money from their sales' administrative fees, which were clearly bribes. As such, the merchant couple went and did what any clone of Naruto would when things were not going well. That is, go eat at Ichiraku Ramen. They were making headway into their second bowl when Chuki came up to join them on his side of the table. Good day, my name is Chuki and I'm the owner and head chef of Ichiraku Ramen. The young lady who served you is Ayame, my daughter. He had a serious look. Is the ramen not to your liking? Janae guessed that the man had seen their unhappy faces and had wrongly thought his food was the cause. Of course not. The food is excellent, he managed not to add, as usual, at the last second. Then what is bothering the both of you, if you don't mind me asking? Tsuki continued. Naruto, and by extension, his clones, had an ingrained respect of Ikiraku's owner that bordered on the religious. As such, both Ane and Janae had no issue answering the man. The story came out piece by piece, just as the clones had prepared it. They were a family of 4 who'd left grass country not to compete with Janae's elder brother Mataki, who'd inherited their father's business. They'd chosen Konoha because they wanted security, and they thought one could not be more secure than in the middle of a ninja village. And Konoha was the greatest of them. When the problems the two bunchins had with the various merchants came up, Tsuki pronounced himself unsurprised. You're not the only one who's had issue with that group. Ichiraku Ramen has been in Konoha for more than 30 years, and even before my tenure the owner butted heads with them, he said with a sad smile. It got worse after the Kyabes attack, when half of them died suddenly, but it's pretty much always the same, the chef continued. They simply try to make more money for themselves by applying economic pressure on other people. Though there are rumors of worse things. But enough about that, Tsuki said, a real smile going back up. What did you say you dealt in? Pretty much everything, Ane said, joining the conversation. We're a family of traders, and we have contacts in a lot of different places. Why, are you interested? You could say I am. There's been a surge in business in the last few weeks and my usual suppliers are struggling to keep up. I might try you out if you can supply me with what I need. Both Janae and Ane forced themselves not to react. They knew very well what had caused this upswing in sales. As of a little than a month ago, there were more than 1,000 cage bunchins of Naruto living in the city. And whatever money the clones got their hands on automatically went on one of two things, pranks or ramen. And ramen meant Ichiraku to Naruto. Janae handed Tsuki his copy of the network's catalog. It was the latest version, which included the products from both tea country and vegetable country. Wave, however, was still late. The couple went back to their bowls as Tsuki poured over the scroll. Ayame brought each a third bowl before the chef came back up from reading. The prices on this scroll aren't the final prices, are they? He said. It would be too good to be true otherwise. No, this is the price we can get these items at. We add a, he thought for an instant, a 10% charge for transportation, along with the usual Konoha import tax. This was something the two clone parents had learned while dealing with all the paperwork. Konoha had both an import and an export tax, which went directly to the Hokage, and was used to fund village security. Tsuki thought visibly for an instant, evidently calculating the numbers in his head. He then smiled. I think we can do business. Who knows, if the quality is good and the delivery rapid, I might have some other contacts who could use your services. Now, let's discuss particulars. Tsuki and Janae shook hands on a deal an hour later, and both made their way back to their respective shops. It was only a start, but the network had its official first client. Prank Day 29. Come on, try it, said Ken on his left. Try it, added Jishi on his right. I don't know, it feels like a waste, replied Guro. He was a Naruto clone working in Tanzaku-gai in an hotel as general help. Not to be insulting. Thing was, Tanzaku-gai very much had a gambling culture. The tourists came here to play, the ones living there played, everyone played, except maybe the casino owners. And even that wasn't always true. You just got a bonus yesterday, so y'all won't even affect our finances, Ken said, crossing his arms. Live a little, he exclaimed. Jishi came up and decided to try another way. You ever tried it? Guro was taken aback by the change in tactics. No. Then how can you say it's a waste? He continued. You think we're lying? No. Then come. If you don't like it, you can at least say that you've tried. We won't badger you anymore, replied Jishi. Promised. Samurai's honor, Jishi answered, putting his hand on his heart. Ken emulated him a second later. Okay, just once. Guro finally acquiesced. It couldn't hurt, could it? That night, the three of them ended up in one of the many casinos of the city. They played for tiny sums, nearly nothing, just for the fun of it. After 30 minutes, Guro had doubled his bonus. After an hour, Ken and Jishi caught on their comrades' luck, and moved to the roulette table. The Naruto clone had doubled his monthly salary by then. It took 3 hours before casino employees asked them to come back another day. Security had watched over them like hawks but couldn't see any proof of cheating. Guro left the building telling the others that he did have fun, and with enough money to single-handedly pay for Ariko's house. His two partners left each with the equivalent of a few months' work. He did make a couple of bunchin as soon as he was alone, and these hit 3 different casinos with similar results. The word was out in the entirety of Naruto's clones before the sun was back up. All Narutos had luck at games of chance to spare. Prank Day 33. The real Naruto did not always go to classes himself. Sometimes he was Iruka, sometimes he was Murmuru, sometimes he skipped school entirely to train, and all of this never on a fixed schedule. For the first taijutsu exam, he went as Murmuru. This was planned. Kiratori, the taijutsu teacher, had started being quite a bit more demanding of the male clone than he was of everyone else. Not a punishment, but looking more like a test of his endurance than anything else. As such, Naruto expected that the first exam would be rougher for him as his orphan copy than it would be for everyone else. He was there mainly as a preventive measure, to ensure the continuation of his prank. And Kiratori did not disappoint. Where everyone faced someone roughly their level, the teacher took on Murmuru personally. And while Naruto was pretty sure the man was pulling his punches, it sure didn't feel like it. Nevertheless, Naruto gave the fight his all, and managed to last longer than the rest of the class had in their own battles. By the end, Naruto was tired, sweating and sore even in places he hadn't known could be that way. Kiratori stopped the fight barely a second before Mamoru dropped to the ground, exhausted. The teacher then left his student recover while he went over the results with everyone else. Said student ended up going last, classes having ended a while ago. First, your notes, the Chunin teacher said in his usual monotone. You have a clear A for the exam. The only things keeping you from a perfect grade are the facts that you still are wasting movements and that you are still telegraphing your attacks a touch too much. Fix those two flaws and you will be as good as someone your age can be. The teacher then took a deep breath. Which brings me to the second item. He suddenly sounded twice as serious. I have a proposition for you. Something outside of school. I'd like you to meet me at the memorial stone tonight at 8. He put his hand on Mamoru's shoulder. Now, go home and have a good supper. The teacher rose and left. Oh, and good work on the exam, he added as he was crossing the door. Naruto didn't know what to think about that, but knew one thing for sure. 2 heads worked better than 1. As such, he quickly made his way home. The council needed to be informed of this, if only to discuss it. Maybe they'd even be able to have an idea about what was the proposition. He'd eat during the meeting. The council had no more clue what was the teacher's proposition than Naruto himself had. The only thing they were sure was that it wasn't the prank being found out, as everyone agreed that Kiratori would have gone straight to the other teachers, or worse, the Hokage, with his news. It comforted him somewhat, but not enough. Naruto did not like having too much attention paid to his clones outside of school. The girl gang was okay, not even being ninjas yet, but the focus of a Chunin, high-skilled at that, was something he wanted to avoid. Nevertheless, he made his way to the memorial stone at the appointed time. Not being there would scarcely make things better. Still disguised as Mamoru, the real Naruto found Kiratori waiting for him where he had set up this meeting. Follow me, the man said, and his voice was unnaturally tight. The Chunin led the boy to a specific stone on the side of the area. It was somewhat taller than the others, with a single name at the top in bigger letters than the other names. Minato Namikaze, 4th Hokage of Konoha. You might not have known, but less than a year before you were born a demon attacked this village, the Kyubi. It was taller than anything living has the right to be, and its malevolence was so great some people died simply by looking at it. The 4th Hokage, whose name is at the top of this monument, ended up fighting the beast. Using a forbidden technique, he defeated the monster at the cost of his own life. Kiratori took a deep breath. But not before the demon caused incalculable damage to the village. Every single person on this stone died that day. He sighed. I have 17 family members on that stone. Both my parents, a single grandparent, my wife, my 2 sons. He trudged on. Both of my brothers and my sister, all of their spouses of their children. Naruto couldn't say anything about that. He'd know mentally that the Kyubi had killed hundreds, maybe thousands of people, but it was the first time that he really saw the impact it had. He could almost see Kiratori's family in his mind's eye, and couldn't help but shed a tear at their loss. I would have happily joined them, but I made an oath to my father. The same oath my brothers swore, the same my father had years earlier. To keep the family art alive, and not have it fall in the hands of other clans, he continued. My sons had made the oath, but their time has unfortunately passed, he said, looking down. I am getting old, and with the job I'm in I probably won't last another 10 years. As such I've been searching for the person who could be the next master of the sharp fist. And you're the best I've seen in the past 5 years, and the only one I can entrust this to. I've been testing you these past weeks, pushing you to your limits, to see if you could handle it. You did even better than I hoped, better than I did at that age. You have what it takes to be a master of the Hyojin family style. The teacher looked directly at Naruto. As such, this is my proposition. Should you accept it, I will take you as my student and heir of my family. I will teach you everything there is to being a ninja, and how to survive it both physically and mentally. It will harsh, and you may have a very different opinion of me once it is done, but I will make you as great as I can. Are you in agreement? Kiratori said after a pause. Naruto did not know what to answer. There was too much thoughts slamming together in his head. There was the prank and the disguises and all the clones and someone who wanted him and. In the end, as usual, Naruto Uzumaki went with his heart. I accept, he said solemnly. W. Midnight's character makes his appearance here, as one of the challenge winners from Chapter 9. Drak FRST, the second winner, hasn't replied with his choice as of yet. If he does, his character will pop sometimes in TTHE future. As for the update speed I can only give my most sincere apologies. Writer's block and computer issues were mostly to blame, but I should have been able to do better. I will try my best to improve the chapter rate, as an entire year without an update makes me feel like a loser. I do reiterate however that short of death, I will not abandon this story. I know the scenes and the endpoints, and finding how to write them down is the issue. Anyway, a good 2013 to you all, and may your favorite fanfictions update repeatedly. 12. Training and Tribulations. A Drop of Poison. Chapter 11. Training and Tribulations. Disclaimer. Naruto belongs to Kishimoto. Ramen belongs to Naruto. Enough said. Prank Day 34. Even though the day was a day off from the academy, Naruto called a meeting of those who were in on the prank. The decision the original had made was to be discussed, its effects needed to be analyzed. Good day everyone, Naruto said as soon as the 3 stragglers, the clones in charge of the clone network, arrived. He could have started without them, but the real student wanted everyone informed. I'm sorry for the unplanned meeting, but some things have to be discussed as soon as they can. Some of you might already have heard, but I'll repeat it anyway. He continued. Yesterday, Kiratori offered Murmuru to take him as an apprentice, and so to teach him his family art. I was Murmuru at the time, and I accepted his offer. What? Iruka said, rising from his seat. He then seemed to realize his reaction, and looked around for a moment. His eyes then came to rest on the original Naruto. Naruto, can I speak to you alone for a moment? The Chunin said, his voice visibly tense. I don't think you need to. He started answering. Now, he said, his voice slipping in the usual tones he used as a teacher when punishing Naruto for his pranks. The effect was immediate. All the clones quickly and silently left. Only Aikibo stayed, not moving from the top of Naruto's head. What were you thinking? Iruka started as soon as the three were alone. The teacher most likely to find you out, and you decide to have him adopt you under a false identity. He seemed to realize something. You didn't tell him about the prank, did you? Of course not, Naruto replied. And he didn't adopt me, actually. He might as well have. An apprentice is considered an heir unless the master has either a wife or children, Iruka replied, clearly quoting the law. Again, what were you thinking? I just couldn't say no, Naruto said, his head down. You didn't see him before that stone, explaining his story. It hurt to watch, how much he loved his family. Naruto brought his head back up. He's dead inside, you know. I didn't realize it before yesterday, but he's nearly empty. The only thing that's left is a continuation of his art, and I couldn't take that away from him. I know it's a risk, and that it wasn't a bright move, but it was the only one I could make. Will you be living with him? Iruka finally asked, his tone much more even. No, good of you to at least think of that. It was his idea, Naruto replied. To keep off any image of favoritism, he said. The room was silent for a minute. Will you be telling him about the prank? Iruka finally asked. Not for now at least, the boy answered. I'd prefer not before the end of the academy year, if possible. Okay, the teacher answered. He then withdrew something from his pockets. Take this with you, then. Naruto recognized it instantly once he had it in his hands. It was the scroll Iruka had received during his meeting with the Sandane. If anything happens and your identity is discovered, I want you to show Kiratori this, and explain him the situation. Send him to me if he still doesn't believe. If worse comes to worse, I'll bring him before the Hokage with everything I found. Come on, Naruto replied. Don't do that. I'd prefer not to, but it's a valid last resort. Better that than being sentenced with treason, or something similar, Iruka countered. Treason, Aikibo cried out from his perch. Iruka laughed a sarcastic little laugh. I wouldn't be surprised. I've begun not trusting logic when someone else's reaction of you is involved. You don't think there would be people who'd execute you just to get back at the Kyuubi? The student had to agree his teacher was right. There would be many clamoring for the death of the beast without care for its container. You may very well be right, sensei, he said dejectedly. Anyway, Iruka said, it's only a last resort. He then smiled. I'll be counting on your usual good work on the impersonation, Naruto. He then ruffled his student's hair from the side, taking care of not disturbing Aikibo there. Can the others get back inside now? Naruto asked. Oh, of course, the Chunin replied. He'd completely forgotten that they were supposed to be in a meeting. Sorry for the interruption. The rest of the discussion went as well as it could, considering most of the members were Naruto clones. It lasted only a dozen more minutes before everyone went his own way. Prank Day 35. Janae and Ane were waiting for Ikiraku's opening, faces down in shame. They felt like they had betrayed one of the few real friends they, as Naruto clones, had. It had taken 9 days to fill Tsuki's order. While the 2 first thirds were en route by day after the ramen chef's request, the rest took quite a bit longer to acquire. People were out of stock, others put severe markups on their prices or simply wouldn't sell at all. The group had to improvise. It took a few days to find other suppliers, and in some cases they even had to go to the source and buy directly from farmers and fishermen. Then it was found that some of their suppliers had used the opportunity to unload rotten or otherwise outdated merchandise, and they had to do that part all over again. They'd expected to take 3, maybe 4 days at most. It took more than twice as much. Still, they'd learned quite a bit. The merchant network would be much more vigilant in the future, and they'd found that storage scrolls kept perishable things from rotting. They had new and better sources for the items Tsuki had ordered, which would make it easier for future orders. The 2 clone hoped dearly there would be future orders. Outside Ichiraku, they had nothing. The chef finally came out of the kitchen and greeted the 2 merchants. Good day. I suppose you are here for more ramen. Chicken like last time, or something else. No, we're here for a delivery, Ane said. Already, Tsuki said, surprised. You must have good contacts. Can I inspect the merchandise? Sure. We have a space rented in a warehouse near the East Gate, Janae said. I can show you right now if you wish. Tsuki nodded. Ayame, please take the counter. I'll be out for half an hour. Sure, Dad, came her voice from the back of the shop. The 3 did small talk as the clone led the elder Ichiraku to the warehouse. Once inside, the chef waited no time before inspecting the merchandise. Good, he finally said. Everything is fresh enough. Some of the fish will have to be cooked soon, but everything seems in order. He turned toward the 2 Naruto bunchins. Can you have this brought to the shop this afternoon? I'll have a bank draft ready for you then. Sure, Ane replied. Pleasure doing business with you, Tsuki said, then shook hands with both clones before leaving. Later that day, the 2 bunchins came out of Ichiraku with both the money from their first sale, and a second, smaller order from the ramen stand. They'd also given the chef their address, and he said he'd contact them if he knew anyone looking for products they could get. With all the losses and errors the network had made, they wouldn't be doing much profit over their first order, but their name was now out there. The clone network was now officially in business. Prank Day 40. The Fire Ninjutsu team now understood why the Scroll of Forbidden Seals said the technique they were training intended to kill its practitioners. They'd finally had the breakthrough they'd been waiting for, and could now fully perform the technique, albeit not in the traditional manner. 5 clones had already died from failing to maintain the jutsu, and by damages which would have killed or maimed a normal ninja. The thing was that once you had the trick, putting fire-aspected chakra in the sphere was easy, and frightfully so at that. There was however no way of knowing how much heat was inside outside of the fact that it became more and more difficult to handle when greater amounts of energy were inside. And when said sphere collapsed, it would release all that energy in a single burst, however much that was. The only defense the group had found up until now was to use another instance of the techniques to absorb the fire from the first. And even that had its drawbacks, as it could only be used upon a sphere bursting, since 2 stable spheres coming into contact with one another would destabilize both. Nevertheless, the group persevered. They currently were training to maintain powerful spheres without issue, and there were 6 clones maintaining the black balls in an isolated corner of the underground base. The record for now was a 7-days-old sphere, having been traded back and forth between clones day and night. The Bunchen leading the group had no clue how strong it was by that point, but didn't want to find out. He probably would turn to smoke if he did. Prank Day 44. Kiratori's family owned a simple dojo built on a large piece of land on Konoha's eastern side. It was visibly built over the foundations of a much bigger building, as traces of the old were still easily discerned. Now that the paperwork is all done and signed, we can finally start, the older man said with a slight smile. He had been noticeably happier in the last few days, and many had discussed the changes. Naruto was simply happy to have made someone's life better. The term, sharp fist, is actually a misnomer, the teacher continued. It is mainly based on how the style looks more than how it works. I will show you. The Chunin took a specific stance, one different from any he had seen before. Kiratori was half turned before him, with both arms at 90-degree angles on either side of his body. Now, attack me, Kiratori said. Naruto as Murmuru did so, going for one of basic combinations of the academy style. The opening kick the Chunin parried with his left arm, and Naruto tried twisting for the follow-up attack, but found he couldn't. His leg was glued to the teacher's forearm. It was Kiratori who turned, and the added momentum for the pulling forced the student to follow. The hold only released once Naruto had passed his teacher's position, and he was sent tumbling and rolling on the ground. What was that? The person disguised as Murmuru replied as he got back up. That way you grabbed me. It is both a common chakra control exercise and the core of the sharp fist, the Chunin explained. While the sharp fist does have cutting techniques, at its base it is a soft style that manages its opponents. As such it has more in common with the gentle fist of the Hyuga than with any other style in Konoha. That poking style of theirs. Naruto said. Indeed. How? Both try to control their enemies. The Hyuga do it by limiting the offensive abilities of their opponents, while my family's style does it by controlling the attacks themselves, Kiratori explained. How does the sharp fist attack then? The same techniques can be used offensively. The style focuses on attacks upon weak points, and what it uses to defend it can also use to open defenses, granting access to those areas. He went to one of the training dummies standing near the walls of the dojo, which was standing straight in a defensive position. Hitting first with an elbow, the teacher then forced the dummy's guard open by making its arm stick at the point of contact and twisting it out of the way. He even struck the dummy straight in the throat in the same movement. Like so. Effective, Murmuru said, visibly impressed. Yes, the teacher said, continuing. But each part in turn. The first technique to master is the chakra control exercise, which is commonly called the tree walking technique. One simply channels energy to the area he wants to stick with, focusing in such a way as to stick like glue. It is used as a control exercise because one must regulate their chakra correctly. Too little and one doesn't stick. He demonstrated on a piece of wood at the dojo's side. The Chunin managed to lift the piece of timber only a single centimeter before the wood fell back to the ground. Too much and one damages the surface. This time, the wood rapped as he placed his hand, sending a few splinters in the air. Kiratori then turned toward his student. Start with the hands, as channeling chakra is easier there. He moved to the side, leaving Murmuru to take his place before the planks. Don't worry, I will be watching and correcting you if necessary. Now, go. Prank Day 49. The trio of Naruto clones sighed as the shore became visible through the fog. One last Kawamiri and they were finally back on dry land after nearly a full day in the water. The Naruto group was finally in wave. They were all that was left of a team of 20 who had tried swimming from the coast of fire, and the 7th such team to try their luck at it. The first 4 teams had tried boats, but the traitorous currents, the hidden reefs and other such dangers combined with the ever-present fog meant they'd failed halfway at best. The ones swimming did better, but still faced constant losses in clones. Only the last and largest group had managed anyone getting there. The next day, after a night's rest, the 3 made their way along the coast and found themselves outside and in sight what they supposed was the closest settlement to Fire Country. We split up, the leader said. He wasn't one of the original network bunchins sent to Wave, who were all gone by the 5th attempt, but he was the oldest amongst those left. We transform into unremarkable citizens and check things out. If you see anything interesting for the merchant network, note it, but I'm more interested in what's making it so difficult to get here. He turned toward his 2 compatriots. I'll be Shiro and I'll hitting the merchants and the shops. You, he pointed to the clone on his left. Will be Nico and you'll look at the coast. Maybe we'll have more luck with finding passage on this side. He then turned to the last copy. You'll be Sanryu and I want you to hit the bars. Try to get as much information as possible on what's happening around here. The newly named Shiro looked away at the town in the distance. With all the issues we had, there's definitely something going on here, and we need to know what. He turned back to the other two. You okay with that? They nodded, faces serious. Good, the leader said. We meet back here at sundown. He clapped his hands. Let's go people. Each went his own way. By the third step all were unremarkable civilians, each different from the previous. They were inside the city less than a minute after that. Following the water, Nico found boats. Broken boats. He might not be a specialist in maritime construction, but even he could identify damage done by a sharp object upon wood. The boats he saw had been destroyed purposely, and he would bet that some group had taken axes to them. With the numbers he found, he was pretty confident this was the work of more than a single person, as it would have taken days for a determined man to wreck that many. He also saw people fishing, but the catches were few and the sizes small. Asking did not help, as the people were surprising defensive of what little fish they had. He was looked at carefully, as if everyone expected him to steal the little they had. It did not fill the Naruto Bunshin with confidence. By the time the sun came down, Nico had found only 2 boats that might be seaworthy, and he wasn't even sure about that. That was out of more than 200 wrecks, which meant that unless they swam back, the 3 of them were stuck in wave for the time being. There was nothing on sale. No, that wasn't quite true. There was a little on sale, but nothing at any kind of reasonable price, and no food at all. The people were guarded and unhelpful, and there were beggars at every corner, emaciated and visibly suffering. There was nothing here that could be of interest to the merchant network. Not in the state the town was in. Shiro tried asking around to find out what was the issue, but no one was talking. Everyone ran or hid when he came close, and even the beggars were silent when asked what was going on. The clone was pretty sure there was some group or organization enforcing this no-talking policy. The fear in the eyes of those he asked was particularly illuminating in that regard. After an hour going around and having no success at gathering any more information, Shiro made his way back to the meeting spot. He hoped the other two had better luck. It was only midday, and the bars were already full. Sanryu, noticing the noise, had wisely decided to wait and watch before entering the first bar he found. A few minutes of observation revealed a half-dozen mercenaries coming and going, and his civilian appearance would have struck out like a sore thumb there. So he changed it. His new look he took from a memory of a female clone serving in a bar. Tall, broad shoulders, and few facial scars. That and a scratched-out mist insignia on his forehead. The female clone had clearly seen how missing Nin were treated, and that was exactly what Sanryu needed right now. Nobody stopped him as he made his way inside, and a single glare cleared him a spot at the counter. Beer, he called, and a fearful bartender handed him one instantly. He took in half the glass in a single gulp, thanking in his mind the fact that clones didn't seem to be able to get drunk. He then slammed back the glass. Tastes like piss, he said, keeping in character. The mercenaries around relaxed at that. I know, right, one said. They laughed. A good half the men in the tavern followed suit. While they did so, the Naruto copy took the time to look around. The whole place was filled with fighters and warriors, visibly swords for hire, with weapons in plain sight. Taking his glass, he tossed back the rest of the beer and swore. I gotta get myself some better booze than this, he said, then looked at the tables opposite the counter. Any of you scum know anybody paying? There's bound to be someone in need of dying around here. A few drinkers were offended and reached for their weapons, but it didn't go farther than that. Then a mousy dark-haired man came up. Well, Shiro and Nico were deep in discussing when Sanryu came up. He was back in his civilian guise. Are your news as bad as mine? He asked as he stopped before the two. Depends on what you have. Shiro replied. What we can say is that there are no boats, nothing to buy and that everyone seems to be starving, all of that because of some unknown group. Gado Company, Sanryu said. What? That's who's in control of this place. From what I remember, they're a shipping outfit doing import-export, he explained. Gado has at least a bar full of mercenaries under his command, and at least another missing ninja. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was at more than twice that much. If they're starving the place and cutting communications, that means they're hiding something, probably drugs or smuggling, Shiro replied. Maybe even slave trading, added Nico. True, the leader said. Any opposition? Not much, the bar infiltrator replied. Main rebels were eliminated pretty thoroughly some time ago. Only one left seemed to be an old man who's building a bridge to the mainland. It's about halfway done, but the man is now missing. The other two whistled. He's got courage, I'll give him that, Shiro said. Question is, what do we do about it? This place is worthless to the network, but I don't like leaving it like this. And bringing more money here to improve things will only make it worse. The three were silent for a good minute, then Nico answered. We kick thing up the chain. As much as I want to get involved, the Clone Council needs to know about this before we try to do anything. The other two nodded. And I have an idea how, the clone continued. Prank day 50. Tsurubo here is inside, looking down at the boy who was seated in the chair opposite his desk. If only he could focus all this talent toward better applications, the third Hokage thought, he'd be one of our best genin. I suppose you know why you are here, Naruto. I didn't do it. The boy in orange replied instantly. The Hokage noticed he was at least getting better at lying, since he had none of his usual tells present. Oh, and I suppose you don't know who painted Kazuhi's classroom bright pink, right? The academy student rose as if to explain something, then fell back down in his seat. No, he said, and Sarutobi could clearly see the lie this time. This has got to stop, Naruto, the Hokage explained. This is your 4th year at the academy. Fourth, it's clear you don't lack the talent, with everything you managed to accomplish, but you have to do better. It won't be possible for you to stay in the academy forever until you pass. Already, I've been having some issues keeping you enrolled. The fact that he'd started young was the only saving grace he had. There were still students Naruto's age enrolled, so he'd been able to argue for another year. Tell me, what are you doing differently this year? The Hokage asked. How do you expect to pass this time? Let it not be said that the Hokage wasn't curious about this prank of his. He was glad Naruto had at least an idea, but curiosity was gnawing at him. This time, Naruto didn't even rise. He simply stood there in his chair, arms crossed and refusing to say anything. This is the fourth prank on the teachers in 2 weeks, Naruto, and not small-scale ones either, Sarutobi said. And I suppose you'll say that you had nothing to do with the teachers' offices getting filled with cats. Naruto smirked at those words, and Hiruzen had him then. I see you did, he said, voice serious. Yeah, I did that one, Naruto said, sighing. But you had to admit it was funny, old man. The Hokage took a deep breath. Let's make a deal, Naruto. I won't punish you for those pranks of yours, not right now, he explained. He hadn't planned to, since he didn't want to interfere anymore into the boys' school life. But you have to pass this year. I'm not even sure I'll be able to get you a place in the academy in the next session. You do that, and there won't be any punishment for those pranks of yours. He then glared down at the boy. Fail, however, and I'll see you on trash duty until you turn 18. You have that, Naruto. No sweat. The boy replied. It's a deal, then. The Hokage said, extending his hand. The boy shook. It's a deal. Sarutobi smiled as he sat back down. I'll hold you onto that, he said seriously, then smiled. So, tell me about those pranks you most assuredly did not do. Naruto smiled back. Well, first there was Prank Day 51. Iruka had been surprised earlier at being called for a meeting, especially since the next one planned only in 2 days. He'd stressed for a moment, imagining the worst, before relaxing. Naruto would have informed him directly if something really dangerous was going on. Still, it occupied his thoughts until classes finally ended. This time, he used the Urahara passageway closest to his home to reach Naruto's base. By now, he was quite used to the darkened paths, and found himself at the council table less than 2 minutes before the appointed time. He was also starting to recognize the different council members. The trio with the books at the end of the table was the group in charge of the trading network, followed by the 2 merchant parents. The Naruto next to them wasn't the real one, only a clone who was currently taking his place in class. Iruka was next, talking with the clone in charge of the underground training. There was also a new one he hadn't seen. Only differences between him and the original were a set of goggles tied to his left arm instead of over his head, and a patch on the other side with what seemed to be a pair of waves depicted. The Chunin didn't know what that meant, but he suspected he would soon find out. Sorry, I got intercepted below, the original disguised as Murmuru said, finally taking his place at the table. Since Aikibo's arrival, he was easier to find. Outside public situations, the rabbit could always be found on or around the real academy student. In the last few days, Naruto was always Murmuru, as the training his new master was giving him was too intense for a cage bunshin. So, the real student started. Sorry all for the surprise meeting, but the network heads have something to discuss which they claim is urgent. He turned to the 3. Your show now. Let me guess, Janae, the civilian father, interrupted. Wave. Yes, Wave, the center merchant head answered. Iruka remembered something about Wave being late in some way. And what's so urgent about it? He asked. The unknown clone stepped up. I'm Nico, 4th generation jumper as part of the original Wave expedition. 4th generation. Aikibo interjected. Clone of a clone of a clone of a clone, responded 4 different Narutos around the table, Nico included. 2 days ago, me and 2 other clones finally managed to swim our way to Wave, he continued. The Chunin teacher's eyes grew wide. The waters around Wave were well known to be treacherous and usable only by knowledgeable sailors. He'd known genin who died in places like that one. He didn't want to know how many clones had vanished on the way. There's nothing valuable in Wave for the trading network at the moment, and a simple reason to that. Gato Corporation, the jumper explained. They amassed a large force of mercenaries along with some missing ninjas, and used that force to close down all access to and from the island. Ouch, Iruka said, then continued when he saw everyone was looking at him. Gato Corporation is big. Very big. Big enough that it is economically more powerful than a good number of ninja villages and countries. Nico continued. One thing is sure, whatever they're planning in Wave, it can't be good. The population is starving, fearful and untrusting. There's no law, and the mercenaries are basically doing what they want with the population. I suppose you have a plan. The real Naruto asked. Nico nodded. The 3 of us do. You see, there's someone building. Iruka rose, interrupting the shadow clone. I'm sorry, he said, eyes wide. You're planning to take on Gato Corporation. Did you miss the part where I said it was as powerful as some ninja villages? The entire membership of the council looked back and forth at each other, then nodded. I've been oppressed enough that I won't let others be so, not if I can do anything about it, the original Naruto said, and you could hear the finality in his words. The Chunin teacher fell back into his seat. It's much too dangerous. You'll be killed. He won't be there, Nico countered. The boss has to stay here to keep the masquerade up. We clones are the ones who will be taking on this mission. There were nods all around the table. And it's not like we won't be making any profit out of this. Iruka signaled him to continue. Right now, everything the trading network has done has been based out of Konoha, right here. He explained. However, the farther we get from Fire Country, the less useful this becomes. The network has been for new place to base itself out of, but hasn't met much luck until now. Nico stopped to take a breath. For operations in the east, WAVE is perfect. It's right between fire and water, and is very close to the main shipping lines in the area. Once Gato is out of WAVE, there would be no competition against us, and some of the natural products of the island are sure to sell well. Iruka nodded in confirmation. WAVE Island tobacco is well known to be the best in the elemental countries, and there are numerous plants used in the fabrication of medicine that are originating from there. The teacher then sighed. I'm not happy about this, but I'll listen. What is your plan then? Well, Nico said. Here's what we came up with. First, we'll need to have. I have not abandoned this story. I have, however, been focused on another story, not this one. For those who are curious, please check my profile as I've put a link there. I won't promise anything regarding the next chapter, as my other story is my main focus at the moment, and I don't know how much time I'll be putting on this one. My most sincere apologies to everyone who waited. Thank you all for reading.